I'm an engineer and I work in oil and gas. I had a very keen awareness of how much energy it takes to run the world. And when I started looking for a transition out of oil and gas, because I believed that the energy transition was going to be an important part of the rest of my career, I landed on geothermal and fusion as potentially the only two untapped primary energy sources that could truly help us transition energy. As I studied more and more on geothermal, I decided that this was one of the key ways. This is the way, right? So we founded Quace in 2018, and we undertook the commercial journey of taking MIT's work in the Plasma Science Fusion Center and making that into a widely available product and service to unlock geothermal. By doing that, I think that's the real way to actually fulfill the promise of geothermal. You know, such a wonderful primary energy source, you have to undertake the goal of drilling deeper, cheaper, harder to truly unlock and deliver on its promise. So we're delivering our millimeter wave drilling systems to go to 20 kilometers, and that radically changes the outlook for geothermal. If you think about it, the oil and gas industry is the only industry with a proven track record over many, many decades. We're talking about 50 years or more, that is able to put a terawatt of new capacity into the world. It's taken 30 years for wind and solar together to reach 1 terawatt. 30 years together to reach 1 terawatt. The oil industry systematically, year after year after year after year, has been putting a terawatt on the globe for the entire of my lifetime, right? So yes, that is the industry that can do it, and that can do it now. As we go into 2030, 40, 50, you know, it's clear that geothermal can do much more than that. And that's where deep, hot geothermal starts to play a foundational role. So I think it's going to be one of the key workhorses of the energy transition, but it will play out over the next 10, 20, 30 years. These are things that transitioning energy takes time, but I think geothermal can actually do it.
Hello, and welcome to this discussion about workforce movement into the geothermal industry. I'm Dee Hay, Geothermal Lead for BP, and I'll be moderating this session today. It's on leveraging core competencies, oil and gas, workforce movement, and career crossover into the geothermal industry. I'll be joined by a diverse panel of geothermal enthusiasts, and we're hoping to keep this conversation as live and relevant to you as possible. So please do post your questions in the chat and we will try to answer all of them. Today, you're going to hear about some unique pathways into the industry. Each and every person in this panel has had a different journey to get into this industry, and we'll be hearing about the challenges and opportunities that we see for others who wish to join us on the adventure. We'll be speaking with Mike Eros, Chief Geoscientist, Sage Geosystems, Princewill, Okechukwu, CEO, 3&3 Consulting, Ghazal, Izadi, VP Reservoir Management and Marketing Strategy at Geothermic Solutions, and Derek Adams, CEO, EarthBridge Energy. Before we get into the live discussion, I'll give a little bit of a background on myself. I'm unique in this panel in that I have stayed in the same company and moved into a geothermal role. So December 31st, 2020, I was fully oil and gas. January the 1st, I became geothermal lead for BP. And the other panelists have their own unique insights and journeys, and we'll hear from them later. I've spent the last 15 years in various oil and gas roles, from exploration to development and production in both conventional, unconventional, in a number of different companies. On that journey, I've learned to stay curious, keep asking questions, find the geoscience solutions that best fit the purpose that we have for it. BP has reimagined its journey as it embarks on the energy transition. As part of that, it's pivoting more towards renewable energy. It's planning to reduce production of hydrocarbons and fulfill a different type of energy need that is emerging in the world. And as part of that, we made a significant investment in geothermal in our partnership with Ever Technologies a couple of years ago. And the Geothermal Lead came out as a response to recognizing that geothermal has the potential to be a growth business of the future. I'm super excited to be helping BP, but I'm also really excited to hear from the other panelists today. So I'm going to ask each of them to give a little bit of an intro about how they've embarked on this journey and how they're finding it so far. So I'm going to hand over to Derek. So Derek, would you like to kickstart this?
Sure. Yeah. Thanks, Dee. And I guess I have to say this before I forget, but thanks to Jamie and everybody that worked so hard on Pivot each year. It's just Fantastic. So I'm Derek Adams. I'm the co-founder and CEO of EarthBridge. We're a Texas-based startup using sedimentary reservoir geothermal to generate 24/7 renewable energy. We're also working on developing a long-duration energy storage technology that we're calling the GeoBattery to store and deliver dispatchable renewable energy as we decarbonize. So my story, I guess I could start back when I was 5 years old. I remember, I'm just kidding, but in seriousness, when I was little, there was a house in our neighborhood that had a geothermal system. And I remember growing up as a kid thinking that that was just really kind of incredible. That was something different. You know, they were getting energy from the earth. And I think that kind of stuck with me over the years and kind of planted that seed to go into geoscience and the energy industry. And so, you know, I was with ExxonMobil for a little over 10 years in a variety of roles, geoscience roles mainly, but with a strong focus on the reservoir and my personally a passion for reservoir quality. And so when I had the chance to pivot into geothermal, you know, I already had an interest in it. I'm a pretty pragmatic person. And so for me, everything kind of clicked into place in my head, in a Venn diagram, if you will, in my head, where I could take the broad skill set and experience that I had in geothermal with interest and a passion for entrepreneurship. Sorry, these are the Venn diagram circles, if you can't tell. And so those overlapped. So something I was, you know, good at, something I liked and enjoyed doing, and that overlapped with a need, the third circle, which is, you know, renewable energy. It just made so much sense to be able to, you know, generate energy and also store energy in those same reservoirs that gave us energy for the past 100 years, but use them for the next 100 years and beyond. So that's kind of where I come from.
That's great. Thank you, Derek. It's the first time I've seen Venn diagrams using fists. So learn something new every day. That's what my takeaway. That's fantastic. Thank you. Princewill, you come from quite a different background from the rest of us. Let's hear from you.
Okay. Hi, everyone. It's a pleasure being here, actually. If we're going to basically rank everyone in these sessions, I should basically be carrying everybody up. So my name is Princewill Okechukwu. I'm the CEO and founder of atThree Consult Limited. So atThree Consult Limited is basically the first geothermal firm in Nigeria and basically in West Africa as a whole. My career, of course, was tending towards oil and gas. I'm almost completing a graduate degree in exploration geophysics as we speak. But while I grew up, same with Derek, I grew up basically in the Jos Plateau, the second highest place via elevation in Nigeria. And because of that, they had a lot of tin and columbite mining. So I was like, probably I should do what these people are doing. And when it was time for me to get a bachelor's degree, I opted into geophysics, but I was kind of an introvert. I didn't want to do what everybody was doing in Nigeria. Anybody in geology and geophysics is mainly in the oil and gas industry. So towards my thesis period, I decided, why not, with the help of my supervisor, and I delved into geothermal. I found that there are basic hotspots, basic potential geothermal locations in Nigeria. And why hasn't someone done something on that? And it's because of that my firm and I myself, including our staff, have made the first pioneering research at potential geothermal hot spring in the Northeast. We'll be presenting that at the GRC in Reno. So we want to make Nigeria the giant of Africa in oil and gas, sixth in the world, to also join the geothermal run. So that's who I am. Thank you.
Fantastic. Princewill, you persuaded me. Let's make Nigeria the geothermal capital of West Africa. That would be fantastic. A reminder to the audience, we can only see the questions if they're put in the question box. So please put them in the question box. I probably said the chat earlier. It's probably my error. So let's make sure we get those questions. We already have a couple, so that's fantastic. Questions in the question box. And next we'll go to Ghazal.
Hello, Pivot. Thank you, Lee, and my excellent fellow panelists for this opportunity. And a special thanks to Jamie and the team for putting this together. this year and every year. So this is the last day of the conference pivot, and we are the first slot. So my name is Ghazal, and I am Vice President of Reservoir Management and Market Strategy at Geothermic Solution. Geothermic Solution is a technology Silicon Valley startup company and have developed a way to efficiently convert geoheat into electricity anywhere, everywhere. Our approach is a little bit different. So it explodes high temperature subsurface heat in a way that we can avoid environmental problems, like removing the water, in situ water, or constant injectivity. It's economically sound, and our goal is to scale up globally and helping and enabling decarbonization. So my journey to geothermal. I started my undergraduate in applied science. I was a mathematician. And at some point I said, I like engineering, so I want to move to engineering field. So that's why I went through the program for petroleum engineering here in US during my PhD, and started to work on geothermal projects. And I was working on the field project with Ultra-Rock to develop enhanced geothermal system solution by understanding rock fluid interaction, and then also couple it with the thermal and chemical reactions. And then I joined Baker Hughes. So prior to joining Geothermic Solution, I had 10 decades of experience in Baker Hughes. I was working mainly in unconventionals globally in order to understand how we can improve the performance as well as reducing the cost, which can bring a lot of technology around horizontal drilling and hydraulic fracturing and stimulation, which was very relevant to what we are trying to do in geothermal. So, that's how I came from different background to the engineering, and then worked in the big corporation like Baker Hughes, and now in a startup. Back to you, Dee.
Great, an amazing example of a hugely technical engineering career making the step into geothermal. Really exciting. Thank you, Ghazal. And Mike, over to you.
Hi, gang. Well, much like Ghazal, I'm also working for a startup here. I'm the chief geoscientist for Sage Geosystems, which is one of the companies trying to test really the critical ideas that have been limiters for so much of what a lot of folks in oil and gas have perceived as the key challenges for geothermal. And as some folks from our company have talked about at Pivot, we're really dedicated to testing things in the field, and we're happy that we're able to do that. And it's a very exciting time, actually, because we're being able to test things, on the scale of what they're doing at Utah Forge, but here in Texas. And so I just feel very lucky every day to do what I do. And, I guess part of my message for the audience really today is we may be the tip of the spear of what's happening in the energy transition, but, I've never seen it look better in terms of cost, what we may be able to achieve and actually, economically drill to produce renewable power by geothermal means. Full stop. So it's very exciting. Much like many of these folks, I've been steeped in the knowledge base of oil and gas. I come from about 15 years of subsurface interpretation experience, geology by background. I did my undergrad in a liberal arts college, actually, and my deep background is really as a field geologist and researcher in paleoclimatology. Most of my research is on that. But I have also about 12 years experience exploring for oil and gas, and also drilling in deep water, West Africa, also Guyana, and also all across the United States, including the ExxonMobil carbon capture facility at Chute Creek, where we developed essentially supercritical CO2 injection for disposal wells. And so I'm really proud of the deep experience that the oil and gas industry has developed, but I'm also even more excited for what we may be able to unlock directly overlapping the skill set of my peer group, which includes all of you guys and everybody I've ever worked with really in industry, to the geothermal problems that we face. I will just add too, I grew up in rural West Virginia, and so a lot of my perspective on what happens when we have industry coming and going and growing and developing is on my mind a lot. The electron value chain may not always be the first choice of oil and gas companies, but I think it can be an increasingly useful choice. So I'm the geologist on the group, and I also have experience with working with government. My background includes the USGS and work there. So I'm very excited to hear from the audience as well about your questions.
Yeah, and it's a great segue, Mike, because we have some questions. Hooray! While I'm pulling these up, I completely agree with you, Mike. The next couple of years are going to be really exciting. There are so many field trials happening, and they all offer so much promise for geothermal. So I think it's very much watch this space, watch it closely. There's some really exciting things happening. So I've got two questions here, and they're a little bit related, and they're going to go to different people. So I'll read both the questions, and then you should be able to tell from the questions who they're going to, but I will flag that to you, and then we'll take it from there. So first question, wanting to get the question in early. I've really been trying to jump into geothermal for a few years, and the jobs are pretty few and largely in startups. I've got an oil and gas resume. Can the panelists who jumped into startups, so I think that's Derek, Ghazal, Mike, please walk us through exactly what you did in terms of outreach, networking, resume, buzzwords. I love a buzzword. That's my addition to the question, to land your positions. Inquiring minds would love to know. So that's one of the questions. And the other one, which is a little bit related, but goes to, I think, myself in this scenario, it's related but different. What can we as an industry workforce do to push this internally? I'd rather stay in my job in oil and gas, but work on geothermal, kind of like what you said happened to you, Deirdre. What kind of normal staff members in industry, what can normal staff members in industry do to help this happen internally? So I'll take the piece around the oil and gas, and I might pull on Mike and Derek as well, who came from an oil and gas company, to speak on that one. But first and foremost, let's go to the startup question, because there's been huge growth in this area in the last 5 years. And we've got some great panelists here who are exemplars of moving from oil and gas into exciting startups. So let's start with you, Ghazal, and then we'll move to Derek and Mike as well.
Absolutely. I think there are several ways to address this question, and it's a very good question. In terms of the skill set of the talent and workforce, it's no-brainer. There is a lot of similarity both in technical, which more addressing the subsurface geotechnical and surface engineering, but also on the non-technical skills like commercial, environmental, regulatory, social, and legal. So these are all the fields that we can bring, and a skill set from oil and gas into geothermal. And then I would like to touch on technology and financial part, because a significant number of subsurface technologies utilized by oil and gas industry today, we are using that also in the geothermal industry, from resource exploration and evaluation, all the way to advanced drilling technologies that allow us to access to the richer resources for geothermal to extract the heat. And it's beyond drilling technologies. It can improve our wellbore integrity with wellbore integrity technologies, zonal isolation, stimulation techniques, all the way to reservoir surveillance and monitoring, and ultimately asset health monitoring, which we are looking at it as an integrated approach from subsurface to surface. So basically, today we utilize a lot of oil and gas technologies, but it is very crucial to develop breakthrough technologies from a variety of scientific fields to harvest the heat from deep earth formation around the globe. So that's why I think it's very important to have these startups to bring those type of innovation and make sure that we have the solution for the future in order to scaling up this geothermal around the globe, globally. And besides the technical part, I want to highlight on the ability of the dealing at a scale with raising finance when we are facing with geological risk. And nobody can do that better oil and gas. With so many years, they have done it successfully. And I think those type of learning is very important to be highlighted and follow up when we are moving from the oil and gas or oil service companies into the geothermal generally, or to the startup.
Yeah, I agree. It's a combination, isn't it? Geology, engineering, commercial, and just highlighting those parts would be just hugely attractive to a startup, I believe. Derek?
Yeah, so it's tough, right? The geothermal industry in general is just orders of magnitude smaller than oil and gas, right? Our civilizations currently run on oil and gas. So you know, something like 25 times as smaller, right? Oil and gas drilled, what, 70,000 wells last year, and geothermal drilled 200, just to put it in well parlance. And you could look at that in, one of two ways. You can be kind of glass half full, glass half empty. I think we shouldn't, I'm not going to sugarcoat it out there for folks. There are not that many of your typical corporate, 9 to 5, 401k match, what you're used to in oil and gas, probably. They're just not out there. And so the optimist, though, would say, gosh, there's just so much room for growth and so much, sort of sky's the limit for geothermal. And that's true. The space is really big. There's a lot of startups out there, but gosh, if we want to get to where we think we want to get in geothermal, NREL predicts by 2050, and there's lots of predictions that they do, but they say, well, geothermal could get to 12% of US power generation, just power. So that's like 57 gigawatts. Right now we're at like 4 gigawatts in the US. And this is, again, just in the US. Okay, so 12%, some may say, gosh, we need to do a lot better. And these technology breakthroughs will get there, but, get us there by 2050. But let's just assume that we're going to get to 12%. That is something like 3,000 on average. Let's say you build a power plant that's 20 megawatts, and you could argue whether it's bigger or smaller, but let's say 20 megawatt power plant, that's 3,000 power plants that need to get built in the United States. So even if oil and gas jump into this in a big way, how many power plants can BP build in a year, or Shell, or Exxon, or Sage, or EarthBridge, right, the startup. So I think there's a ton of opportunity out there. The struggle is, I think somebody earlier in the week said, if you want to come to geothermal, inviting folks, bring the enthusiasm. And that's what we're looking for. And that's what we did when we were building the core team here at EarthBridge. It's like, you really got to get out there, be willing to take a chance, show initiative, and be passionate about what you're doing. And to be fair, a startup is also, they're operating pretty lean, and they're looking for very specific skills. Maybe not, oh, we need you to work in this basin, which often comes up on a job description, right? Oh, well, I didn't work that basin, but I worked, another basin that's very similar. But we know that specific experience is not necessarily required, because it's the critical thinking, it's your training, it's your background. So present yourself as an extremely enthusiastic person that really wants to do something and is really committed to something, and I think you'll get traction.
I think you're absolutely right, Derek. Passion, energy, positivism, and an eye to solution finding is really a big part of it. Mike, we're going to go to you next. I'll say a few words, and then Princewill, I'm gonna ask you how it is to go from being a graduate and a near graduate to jumping into an industry that doesn't exist in your country. So be ready for that one coming up after me. But first of all, we'll go to Mike.
Yeah, I'll just echo what everyone has said, especially Ghazal, about how your skill sets that you have now are way more useful than you may ever appreciate for geothermal. And it's really on the level of basic things like very little is known about anything on this planet below 2,000 feet, full stop, globally. And that is not getting easier just because we have a little bit more of an AI capacity on the surface. We have a lot of challenges that are frankly, really exciting, actually. How much data we're going to have to analyze. And so your skill sets that you have now, your proximity to drill rigs, your proximity to the field, are all skills that, from what I hear, are rapidly disappearing as the baby boomers retire. And so I don't know the age of the individual, and it may not matter, necessarily. But at the same time, if you're trying to build a career, I think that your skill sets that you have now will definitely retain their utility. As far as where we end up connecting to startups, that's a magical question. And I think it takes a leap of faith, really, personally. And I could not be in the position I'm in today if I hadn't had the security of more than a decade working for one of the largest corporations on the planet. That gave me the ability to have a family someday, lots of things that I may never have had. But at the same time, that's not necessarily where you need to live all your dreams. And I'd love to actually work in close partnership with oil and gas companies in the future. I think that's really ideal for our planet. We all know how much the talent base can do. But more specifically, you build yourself up, understand your abilities, and then also be honest about where you can actually provide things like de-risking, things like a detailed subsurface interpretation that you can really make value judgments on. That's valuable. That's very valuable.
Yeah, I agree. So coming from my perspective, I am sitting in an oil and gas company, and there are a number of questions coming in around, okay, so how do we grow things within an oil and gas company, right? So I'm Geothermal Lead to BP. Who follows, and what does that look like, and how can we grow that? I am a firm believer in what Derek said. I think we need to be enthusiastic advocates for the geothermal industry within the oil and gas industry. Most, if not all, of the majors are seriously reconsidering or have already reconsidered their strategies and are pivoting towards renewable energies. So this is the time now for geothermal to become that third renewable energy. Geothermal is different to wind and solar. It's the only baseload 24/7 energy source. It is the only one that can provide 365 days of energy continuously. Wind and solar won't fulfill that. There is a need and a gap for geothermal in the market. And the more we talk about that enthusiastically in our companies, we can change things, because the more we talk about it internally, the external world is already doing that job. It will go all the way up to the C-suite. That is how these things happen. It needs to come from all directions for change to take place. And companies are realizing that options like battery storage and other energy solutions are incredibly expensive. And companies like BP and Shell and Exxon want to make money fundamentally, and geothermal may be one way for them to fulfill that gap. So the more that we can speak enthusiastically about it, the more that we can implement change. So, you know, the story for BP is a story of a small army of enthusiasts 3 years ago who did a strategic review, who pushed geothermal from being talked about by 1 or 2 people to actually getting investment in a geothermal technologies company, right? So that's how quickly things can happen, and we need it to keep happening, right? It's not easy. We just have to keep doing this, because once a large company makes a strategic decision, they go after it in a very big way. And so the next couple of years will be critical in terms of the field trials we've already talked about, the general momentum that we have on the globe to transition towards renewable energies. So let's just keep speaking positively. Let's be advocates in our companies to make things change. It's not easy, but it's really fun, right? Let's admit it. It's really fun fighting for something that you think is worth doing. So let's keep doing it, guys. So Princewill, you come from, talking about needing enthusiasm, you come from a country that doesn't have a traditional geothermal industry. How did you come from being a graduate, and what do you recommend to others to get to that point of growing something in geothermal when it's not there already?
Well, thank you. The question, first of all, should come from, if you do not do it, who will do it? Actually, we know that in November last year, all of our leaders all went to Glasgow and were saying stuff about climate change at COP26. Later on a month or so, our countries came up with 2060, 2050, 2030, several net zero targets. And my own country, the first leading crude oil producer in the whole of Africa, the 6th in the world, said 2060. To be very realistic, we in geoscience, we geophysicists, especially people who drill, at some point when we say that this and that will happen, we have to come back to the table and see how real that is. And the time to speak the truth is here. How are you sure that a country with an almost unlimited reserve of crude will leave crude for lesser sustainable energy? So that is where it comes in. We are in a very, very bad situation with respect to how we use heavy carbon. And I thought about it. It started when I was basically in my undergraduate, and everybody was doing seismic. If someone isn't at Shell, BP, or at ExxonMobil doing their internship, they are probably at the NNPC. So I thought about it and said, look, This is geothermal, this is oil and gas. All of them are in the subsurface. We have to do a reconnaissance survey, we have to do exploration, we have to drill, we have to bring out liquid. It doesn't matter how thick it is. So it's still the same knowledge. And considering that I grew up basically in the northern part of the country and I could easily speak the language properly, and I knew of a particular place just emanating hot water from the ground about 56 degrees centigrade, my supervisor talked me into it. And when I even presented it in my project proposal, everyone was laughing like, are you serious? But you have to, first of all, recognize the condition. Could you imagine I was at the Kenya Geothermal Congress just about 3 weeks ago, and Djibouti, if you know what Djibouti is, with due respect to Djibouti, they were mentioning Djibouti, and Nigeria is still there. And it's not like we have subsurface manifestation. So if it still comes back to the initial question, if we don't do it, who will do it? So what I do tell people in the oil and gas industry, especially in this part of the world, here in the Niger Delta, where we are much, is that one way or the other, Nigeria will stand at the judgment throne in 2060 when they ask everybody. They will ask Iceland, how far have you gone? They ask Kenya, who are over 800 megawatts of geothermal producing capacity, how far have you gone? And of course, realistically, if we do not meet it, just in case we do not meet it, because Nigeria right now are considering natural gas, which emits lesser carbon. If we don't meet it, will we be beaten? Will we be spanked? At least it will be like, oh, we tried. Hydroelectric is there, but it's not reliable. The Nigerian national grid has crashed 5 times in 2022 alone. So, but when we say, oh, geothermal, people tried with geothermal. Oh, geothermal at least created, even though it's 500 megawatts, at least if you are to beat up the child who doesn't do well, at least you will less beat the child who at least tried a little best. So we are trying to put Nigeria in the map. 3&3 Consult Limited that I founded is trying to to create a geophysical data bank for all potential geothermal sites in Nigeria. And we have successfully done so, I myself and my supervisor that I work very closely with. And it's going to be presented at the GRC, but at the end of the day, it's going to tell Shell BP, it's going to tell the whole oil and gas company that as long as they are doing it outside, they could also try it in Nigeria by shifting some of the old equipment they have originally for drilling. We don't want to know what is drilling, or is it the seismic equipment for exploration? Please kindly take it inland, do a feasibility study, drill the first wells, and create a geothermal power plant that will supply the grid. And as you said, Dee, it's base load, 24 hours. Of course, we don't have the winter here, but in the rainy season, in the dry season, there will always be electricity. So it's always thinking forward. It's always having that sustainable future mindset. It's always about doing something great. In 1950, when Kenya, which is the giant of Africa in geothermal right now, how many wells did they drill? And it was basically almost forgotten about for almost 30 years. It was only in 1983 or 1982 that it started again. So we recognize that here in Nigeria, we're basically, or in other areas that are not basically geothermally blessed by staying on the place boundary or in the Pacific Ring of Fire or the East African Ridge or the Mid-Atlantic Ridge, it's that there is opportunity. As far as there are subsurface manifestation, you have to do something. You have to champion something for the better cause of mankind. Thank you very much.
Your enthusiasm is bowling me over, Princewill. I think I know how you started your company off because you're just demonstrating it with your passion. It's tremendous to see. And there is a follow-on question there, and it's for Derek and Princewill. So Derek and Princewill, what do you have to say about people thinking of starting their own companies? Do you have any advice? And there's also a question more generally around how do we fund startups? So Princewill, let's go back to you. Let's I'm conscious of time, so let's try and do it in 3 or 4 sentences. What do you have to say about people starting their own companies? Any advice for people coming behind?
Why not? Why don't you come? Come. this is the time. Jamie Beard would say, this is the time. This is the time for geothermal. So you have to bring all you got. Geothermal now is about partnerships. You know that if it is Evo or Ornat coming in together, it's partnership. And by the time you're good in closed loop, and this one is good in production, and this one is good in lithium production, it will make the whole journey towards sustainable energy faster. So you should come with everything you've got, come with the funds and resources, because a company will not run itself at the beginning. Once you have all of those in place, I'm very sure that the particular country, the particular geographical location you're based at will definitely grow with respect to geothermal.
This is the time. I like it. Derek?
Yeah, so I would echo that call. I would say go out and start your own company. There's tons of room, or join a startup. You know, come work with one of those that are out there, kind of pushing the envelope and really doing the hard work. Look, that's not easy. Starting your own company is definitely not easy. A geothermal company is upstream, midstream, and downstream, kind of all in one. Plus the power markets, you know, in regulated, deregulated markets. I mean, there's like a whole slew of other stuff that maybe you're not familiar with. So you really need to be kind of a jack of all trades. But it's, you know, I get up every day knowing that whatever I'm going to work on that day, it's going to make a meaningful difference for not just me, my family, but like my community and heck, the planet, right? So, you know, take a risk and get out there and let's change the world. Let's do something important. It's going to take everybody, you know, the cliche saying of all hands on deck has been used quite a bit, but gosh, you know, Jamie named the subtitle of this conference correctly. So, yeah.
Yeah, she really did. And so a question for everybody now, and this is going to be super short. I'm going to try and demonstrate it, but we'll see. What did we not learn from our previous careers or our degrees that is relevant to geothermal? And for me, it's customer focus. So, you know, with oil and gas, we always started with, oh, there's a huge oil and gas prospect. Now let's move that resource by pipeline or by ship to where it needs to be. Whereas with geothermal, we can't do that. We almost need to find who needs electricity and then provide it to them. So I think that was a big difference for me, a bit of a mindset shift. But hey, you know, everybody else on the line knows that now, so that's great. What about the rest of you? What did you not know before embarking in geothermal? What did you not learn? And Mike is jumping in there.
Yeah, I would say 2 words: igneous rocks. And I think it's a beautiful thing. But you know, if you're working in oil and gas, you kind of forget that there's a lot else going on in the world that is pretty complicated. And I point that out just to point out that the industry that has been active for more than 100 years has been trying to solve some problems that are pretty freaking challenging. And hats off to that technical community. And you have to learn from them too. And that the word is igneous rocks.
Yeah. Princewill was first and then Ghazal.
Well, mine is actually jealousy. Jealousy, because, okay, imagine in an oil and gas firm, you're basically trying to tell them, embrace geothermal that will kill oil and gas. Do you think they will listen to you? Basically, when we take it up the ladder, up to the ministries and say, there is geothermal there, they'll be like, you could just go. So I never knew about the jealousy, and it's actually true. So one of the things we have to work towards is how to rate it side by side to let them know that this is what is going to curb that 1.5 degrees centigrade of our climate. And that jealousy is what I didn't know.
Interesting. Ghazal, you had your hand up?
Yeah, I think one of the very interesting learning coming from oil and gas into geothermal is about how you want to attract more investor to put money in this segment, right? And the reason for that is because the key element is about the cost and installation and speed of the improvements during the project development, right? Which directly impact on the return of investment for investors. And that could be addressed from different way, right? On the de-risking the project, optimize engineering, and then we are linking the resource deliverability to the plant capacity. As what we see today, a lot of plants are not producing at capacity today in California, for example. And that means that we spend a lot of time and cost when we don't understand the resource. So that impacts slowing down the money come to our segment if we are not bringing the right engineering design and mindset, and ultimately streamline the operation. So imagine that we have all the money we want. The other important part is that how we deal with the public reaction. And I can bring, because oil and gas is much more far from the people houses, and heat is very locally, and we might need to drill on the backyard of somebody, right, to extract the heat. And I can bring the example of Hawaii in Puna, when the lava flowed and we lost some of the well in the geothermal field, as well as the power plant. We need to go and back up and restore the plant by drilling new wells. And there was a lot of protest around drilling around. So this communication with the public, educate them why you want to be independent from expensive hydrocarbon product is very critical. So financial, and then have a dialogue and speak not in the technical way, that people understand why it's important. So this was some of the new learning for me when I'm coming from oil and gas to geothermal.
Well, I have something to say. I have something to quickly add with Ghazal. It's actually the funding and the financials. Of course, we didn't know, because atThree, using ourselves as an example, we're basically into geotourism first and geothermal R&D. We don't have the rigs. We don't have the technology, the drilling technology and the rest yet. We haven't even gotten to that stage of a well yet. Just major R&D, creating a data bank. So we're doing, what we do is mainly in geotourism. So trying to mix geotourism, trying to tell all of these oil and gas headed individuals over here that it is by integrating geothermal into a geotourism space. And when we say, come, let us actually go there, let's go to Iceland, let's go to the Philippines, let us go to Bali, let's go to Indonesia, let's go to the Rotorua in New Zealand or Yellowstone in the US. When we take them there, we hope that they will basically see and come back and invest in Nigeria. But if we do not do that, the funding issues that Ghazal mentioned is what all individuals who want to come into the geothermal space may not be able to factor, because it's basically difficult when you do not earn much, but you have to travel, you have to attend the Congress like we just went to in Kenya. We need to attend the GRC in Reno. Probably we would like to go to the World Geothermal Congress in China in 2023, because if you do not go, because if you do not sharpen your skill set in geothermal, we all know that yes, you're in oil and gas, it's similar, but you have to sharpen the skill set in geothermal by attending the workshops, the short courses, or probably a proper master's degree in geothermal. So these are the problems we didn't know, and it's a warning to everybody.
That's true. So I think we'll take one last question here before we go to each of you giving your wrap up statements, if that's okay. Derek, we'll go to you on this one. And it is about, okay, well, what do we not know before we start this journey? And kind of how do we fill those gaps? It's sort of a question like that. But it is, are you all having to learn about surface facilities, power purchase agreements? Who is teaching you these things, and how do we learn? I'll take a pitch at it first. We'll go to you then, Derek, and then anybody else wants to speak up, and please put your hands up on this one too. So speaking from my own personal experience, it was entirely new to me. So I didn't know about power plants. I didn't know about district heat networks. And there was a fair degree of self-learning involved with that. But I didn't start from zero, right? So it all comes back to that thing around stay curious and keep asking questions and read a lot of material and then ask more questions. And that's kind of how I learn. I learn as much from others as I do from just kind of reading by myself. So it was new to me, but it's not unsurmountable. There are people that you can reach out to. And I personally believe the geothermal community is one of the more open communities. If you pick up the phone and call people, they will be happy to have a conversation with you, at least in my experience. So I would say do lots of reading, and there's lots of material out there, and the geothermal industry is not a new one. There are also learnings from wind and solar. There are some commonalities. And so that's my experience, at least. But let's go to you too, Derek, on that one.
Yeah, I mean, I'd echo that too. Do a ton of reading. There are a lot, National Renewable Energy Lab is a good start. I mean, there's so many national labs that put out kind of easy to digest, compilations of different sort of parts, the working parts of say the electricity grid or whatever it may be that you're trying to get up to speed on. When I built EarthBridge, it was, the realization that, yeah, I've got the subsurface chops and the drive, but I need to build a team that fills in those gaps and complements my skills. So that's exactly what I did, Dee, as I started reaching out to folks. LinkedIn is a powerful tool. Reach out to folks. They'll be willing to talk to you. And one thing I think that we need to make sure that we're cognizant of is to, remember that there are folks in the geothermal industry that have been doing this for many, many, many years. And they have so much knowledge and wisdom to bring to bear on this. And I mean, that's one reason why we have someone like that on our team, someone that's built power plants, done it before. So yeah, reach out and learn as much as possible. It's a steep learning curve, but look, if you can do it, you can definitely do it.
Same thing. It's basically the same thing I said. You have to read out, and I'm just even hearing that there's a library, an energy library or so. You just have to read out. You have to sharpen the skills. I myself, I could literally take 10 more master's degree. The most important thing is that I have to gain that particular skill set in geothermal and apply them. And that's one of the major difficulties that we're facing, but it's something that if the big corporations, if people who are more advanced in geothermal, as Derek says, identify this problem, especially when people reach out to them, and probably a course in Iceland or probably a course at the Geothermal Institute in Auckland will do.
Yeah, I like Derek's comment around building a team around you. I think that's just perfect, isn't it? Fantastic. So we're running out of time, sadly. I'm gutted. I've had so much fun with you guys, and I've learned a lot. So let's have some closing comments. And what advice would you guys give to folks, either recent graduates like Princewill, or seasoned professionals? What would you say to them to A, encourage them to make the shift, or B, join you on the journey, and how you would do that, Ghazal?
Yeah, I like to emphasize what Derek mentioned, that we want to be in fact impactful. So the vision is to ensure access to affordable, reliable, and sustainable modern energy for everybody. And we know that demand is increasing, like it's not linear, it's exponentially. So in the last 4 decades, global energy consumption doubled. We are talking about 155 trillion kilowatt hour. So we need more energy. And there are 2 other topics I would like to emphasize in the closing, which is one is energy poverty and energy security. So 13% of the total population globally, they has no access to electricity across Africa, Asia, Europe. And when we talk about energy security, these past few months, we learned that we need to reduce the expensive dependency of imported hydrocarbon products from the largest oil and gas producing countries for power electric or electrification of ground transportation. So we need alternative energy source. And bulk portion of this hydrocarbon product could be replaced by renewable like geothermal. So we have a very bright future in order to bring geothermal into the picture at a scale globally, everywhere, anywhere. So, and we can do it together. Thank you, Dee.
Excellent. Mike, handing over to you.
Sure. I think it's important for us not to be scared of where we are today, and also to see that bigger picture that Ghazal and others are talking about, and about how, for people where they are starting out, the future is going to include a much, much bigger group of options. It has to, like Ghazal said, it's very humbling to realize that the largest oil field you may ever discover in your life will only meet demand for world consumption for one day, like 110 million barrels or something. I mean, So we owe it to our children to at least consider, I think, all of these options. And I think we're doing that. And it's very inspirational, for example, to see folks from the oil and gas industry, I work with them every day, who are putting all their energy into this, literally, because they really think it can happen. And so I guess I would say hold tight where you are if you feel like you can't make the financial jump. I think that's very real for lots of people. But, I also say, don't be afraid to think about where you want to be in 3 to 5 years, and also think about how what you do really contributes value where you are to that potential future. And, I think there's a lot of questions right now about why geothermal hasn't necessarily had a full life cycle economic, discussion in every single way. That's really important for us to talk about, because we're not going to have necessarily the sexiest solution that's going to work. We're not going to have necessarily the most the largest immediate solution. They may have to start scalable, but that's the only way that we'll be able to start testing these ideas and get incremental. And so it's going to be a great future in that way. And I think if you hold tight, that's great. And if you can afford to make the jump, do it.
Fantastic. Princewill, closing comments from yourself.
Well, you have to, what I will tell people in my background or in my level is that Ghazal said that the US is basically for energy. You have to scale up in energy. But with respect to your geographical position, and in our case in Nigeria, any other country who want to start up in geothermal, you have to look at the priority. And the priority is in research and development, first of all. You don't have to worry yourself about the energy, because talking about being realistic, that won't be possible for like 5 to 10 years. So you have to focus on research. If you're in your final year, if you're in your sophomore year, you talk with your with your supervisor or with your professor, you tell them that I want to do something with respect to geothermal, even though it's things as little as magnetic surveys, seismic surveys, or the like. So it's one of your first steps, and you don't have to see it, especially in terms of funding. You just have to continue trying, and it's more like a wake-up call to people or to the big corporations, as I said earlier on, to basically look down, because at the end of the day, even though it's by shares, even though it's by they themselves coming to develop the geothermal fields in the first place, it's going to be a win-win situation for everybody. So try to face the little that's in your front, especially that much is not really expected from us, more or like the US, but find your position, know what to do. Face research and development, more especially. Make sure that your dissertation, make sure your thesis, make sure that your PhD work is probably on geothermal. And basically your name will be after 1 or 2 discoveries. Perfect.
Derek, over to you.
Yeah, I hope this was useful for folks out there. I'm sure we didn't get to all the questions. I've had a great discussion. I'd be happy to continue the conversation tonight at the happy hour at Karbach over a beer, or please, drop me a line on LinkedIn. And sorry for those that couldn't be local.
You can just call me, put the phone on the side.
I'll take your drink tickets for you. That's fine. But really, the sky's the limit on geothermal, right? There's just so much opportunity and room for growth, especially even low-hanging fruit like here along the U.S. Gulf Coast, where there are hot reservoirs, and we know where they are, and we just need to go develop them. So, I'm super optimistic, and I'm excited to be part of this, and I can't wait to see what we all achieve. So come join us.
That's brilliant. Thank you very much, Derek. So, echoing a lot of what you folks have already said, I think my perspective from within BP might be subtly different in that I see a lot of people working hydrocarbons who want to do something different. And geothermal is the one renewable energy where they can absolutely use their subsurface skill set tomorrow to do something very impactful and different, and to be part of that energy transition, right? So my advice, honestly, when I started this job, I suddenly became really popular, and I thought it was my glowing personality until I realized it was because everyone wanted to join me on this journey, which is not a bad thing either. But my advice to folks who come to me, and I always have an open door policy on this one, is to stay interested and do your research on geothermal, do a great job in hydrocarbons in the subsurface work that you're doing, because it'll absolutely be relevant. And be ready for when opportunities emerge and you do not know when those opportunities are going to come up. Go speak to your geothermal lead or your friendly geothermal scientist who works outside the company and just learn about the business, because that enthusiasm will go a long way. Okay, guys, I think we're all ready to wrap up here now. So thank you to everybody. It's been really fun, and looking forward to continuing the journey. Bye all.
Yes, bye. See
Thank you.
Thank you.